Mexico, a nation known for its vibrant culture, sprawling landscapes, and rich history, now finds itself on the precipice of an economic transformation. As the world grapples with global supply chain tensions and the US-China trade rivalry, Mexico's proximity to the United States and rising manufacturing sector are proving to be powerful economic drivers. Once primarily viewed through the lens of resource extraction and agriculture, Mexico is now emerging as a critical hub for international trade and investment, supported by the increasingly popular concept of nearshoring. Imagine a Mexico where each advancement in technology and industry seems almost like a deliberate response to centuries of economic struggle and aspiration. Since the colonial era, Mexico's fortunes have risen and fallen, defined by its role as a resource hub and at times a labor-intensive manufacturing center. But the current moment is different. It's shaped by global shifts in supply chain dynamics and intensifying geopolitical competition, especially between China and the United States. This transformation is not just about trade routes. It's a recalibration of Mexico's economic identity, from agricultural exporter to an industrial player, positioning it as a bridge between North America and emerging markets. Geographically, Mexico holds a unique advantage with a 1,954-mile border with the U.S. and over 50 border crossings, creating a robust foundation for cross-border trade. Mexican states like Baja California, Nuevo León, and Chihuahua have thrived economically due to their closeness to this border, enjoying a high GDP concentration that reflects their integral role in trade. Recent data from 2023 underscores this shift. While northern states have historically been economic leaders, Mexico's southern states, such as Oaxaca and Tabasco, are now experiencing similar growth rates, propelled by increased foreign direct investment, FDI, driven by nearshoring. Companies from the US, Europe, and Asia are shifting operations to Mexico, escaping the rising costs and logistical constraints of manufacturing in China. This shift has led to record-breaking investment inflows, with Mexico marking an impressive 18% growth in foreign investments in 2023 alone. For over a century, the US-Mexico border has been a dynamic conduit for economic exchange, evolving from a porous frontier to one of the world's most significant trade arteries. Initially, a divide between vastly different economies, this border became a lifeline during the industrial age, as maquiladoras, manufacturing plants along the border, began exporting to the United States in the 1960s. By 2023, this once fledgling network transformed into a multi-billion-dollar trade ecosystem where Baja California, Nuevo León, and Chihuahua operate almost as extensions of the U.S. manufacturing landscape. Investment in infrastructure, from highways to advanced rail networks, has also expanded the region's capacity for high-volume exports, fostering a level of economic activity that makes northern Mexico a central force in the nation's GDP growth. Mexico's economic journey is steeped in its abundant natural resources. In the early 20th century, Mexico's oil reserves, particularly the discovery of the Chicontepec field in 1916, placed it among the world's oil powerhouses, enabling it to generate substantial revenue. In 1938, Mexico nationalized its oil industry, founding Pemex, which became a pillar of government revenue, accounting for up to 40% of fiscal income in the mid-20th century. This revenue enabled Mexico to embark on a development spree, investing heavily in infrastructure, education, and healthcare. The post-World War II era, known as the Mexican economic miracle, saw rapid growth as manufacturing surged, fueled by urbanization and increased literacy rates. Mexico's GDP grew consistently, averaging 6.5% per year from 1950 to 1981. However, this growth proved unsustainable due to Mexico's over-reliance on oil revenues. When global oil prices plummeted in the 1980s, Mexico's foreign debt surged, leading to the 1982 debt crisis. The resulting economic contraction marked a decade of stagnation and economic distress known as the Lost Decade. Long before oil became Mexico's economic backbone, the nation's wealth was derived from silver, gold, and other minerals extracted in colonial mines, which funded Spanish empire building in the Americas. The discovery of oil in the early 20th century, particularly at the Chicontepec field, represented a turning point, marking Mexico as a future leader in energy production. Pemex, founded in 1938 amid a surge of nationalist fervor, became not only an economic institution, but also a cultural symbol of Mexican sovereignty. Pemex's revenues enabled the government to launch ambitious programs, transforming Mexico's cities and investing in health and education. However, this wealth was precariously tied to oil prices, and when global oil markets crashed in the 1980s, Mexico faced a brutal economic reckoning. The 1982 debt crisis highlighted the volatility of a resource-based economy, plunging the country into what would later be called the Lost Decade, and leaving a legacy of high inflation and stifled growth that took years to stabilize. The North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA in 1994 ushered in a new era for Mexico, propelling it toward a diversified economy. Trade liberalization enabled Mexico to expand beyond commodities and embrace manufacturing, especially in electronics and automobile production. Between 1994 and 2021, exports rose over fourfold, reaching $465 billion. This trade boom contributed to significant FDI, job creation, and formal employment growth in Mexico, providing stability and pension benefits that were previously absent. Today, the updated USMCA agreement continues to strengthen Mexico's manufacturing sector. New stipulations require a substantial portion of goods to be produced within North America, encouraging companies to establish operations in Mexico to benefit from tariff reductions. This has led to a surge in assembly plants across Mexico, boosting local economies and creating multiplier effects in related sectors such as telecommunications and infrastructure. The North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, of 1994 was as much a social as it was an economic experiment designed to integrate the U.S., Mexican, and Canadian economies. While U.S. manufacturers benefited from cheaper labor, Mexico gained unprecedented access to U.S. markets, spurring investment in sectors like electronics and automobiles. By 2021, exports became Mexico's economic powerhouse, with manufacturing employment increasing in cities that had previously relied on agriculture. NAFTA's benefits were felt in tangible ways. Not only did formal employment rise, but access to social security and healthcare expanded. The agreement fundamentally reshaped Mexico's workforce, pulling millions from informal work and generating demand for technical skills, an educational shift that would shape generations. Yet, the need for continual reinvestment in skills and technologies became apparent, with Mexico adjusting to the competitive demands of global markets, even as it confronted challenges of workforce productivity. Despite these promising developments, several challenges hinder Mexico's rise to developed nation status. One of the most pressing issues is Mexico's slow productivity growth. Since the 1980s, productivity gains have lagged significantly behind comparable economies like Chile and South Korea, with Mexico's real GDP per capita growing by only 0.7% on average from 1980 to 2019. This stagnation is attributed to an expanding labor force rather than efficiency improvements in production. Another significant challenge is the informal economy, which accounts for over half of Mexico's employment. Workers in this sector often lack job security, pensions, and healthcare benefits, limiting overall economic productivity. Limited access to formal credit exacerbates this issue, with domestic credit to the private sector representing only 24% of GDP, one of the lowest rates among OECD nations. Educational attainment is another obstacle, as Mexico trails other OECD countries in enrollment and literacy, which restricts the growth of a skilled workforce necessary for sustaining long-term productivity. While economic reforms have opened up new avenues for growth, Mexico's long-standing challenges remind the nation of the precarious nature of development. Productivity growth has stagnated as the country's workforce expanded without sufficient investment in efficiency-enhancing technologies or training. In contrast to high-performing peers like South Korea, Mexico's productivity gains remained incremental, tied to labor quantity rather than labor quality. The informal sector, covering over half of all employment, has exacerbated these productivity issues, creating an economic underbelly where workers lack benefits and protections, hindering both personal advancement and national economic performance. Adding to these hurdles, Mexico's low credit access has restricted small and medium enterprises, SMEs, preventing innovation and capital expansion. Similarly, limited educational attainment, particularly in rural areas, hampers the development of a skilled workforce, leaving gaps that Mexico must address to compete with other emerging economies. Mexico's economic future appears promising, yet precarious. As nearshoring trends persist, Mexico must carefully harness the influx of capital to address structural issues like income inequality, limited educational opportunities, and insufficient financial inclusion. The nation's heavy reliance on U.S. trade, which accounts for 80% of its exports, adds an element of vulnerability. Political shifts in either Mexico or the United States could reshape this trade relationship and impact Mexico's economic trajectory. But unlike many European economies, Mexico's young and growing workforce, coupled with its strategic location near the U.S., offers a unique advantage in an era of deglobalization. With careful planning and sustained reforms, Mexico could transform this economic momentum into a foundation for long-term growth, bringing it closer to achieving developed nation status and reducing inequality across its diverse regions. Mexico's young, vibrant workforce, among the youngest of OECD nations, provides a demographic dividend that many European nations lack, giving Mexico a potentially decisive edge in the 21st century global economy. As nearshoring grows, the influx of capital presents a unique opportunity, but it also necessitates careful management to ensure this growth benefits the entire population. population. Moreover, Mexico's deep reliance on U.S. trade underscores a vulnerability that cannot be ignored, especially with fluctuating U.S. trade policies and potential political shifts that could affect bilateral relations. The challenge for Mexico will be to leverage its strengths, geography, workforce, and trade agreements, while addressing its structural weaknesses. This requires reforms in education, technology adoption, and financial access to build a resilient economy capable of enduring external shocks and fostering sustainable, inclusive growth. Think of Mexico's economy as a phoenix rising from the remnants of its resource-dependent past. Armed with a manufacturing base, nearshoring benefits, and strategic U.S. proximity, Mexico stands at a critical juncture. The challenge lies in managing this growth responsibly, ensuring that this newfound prosperity benefits all Mexicans and contributes to a more equitable, sustainable economy. The coming years will reveal whether Mexico can navigate these waters, transforming from a hopeful economy into a truly developed nation. Imagine Mexico's economy as an engine, slowly recalibrated over decades from the simple extraction of raw resources to the complex integrated manufacturing network it is today. The economic path Mexico has taken is deeply intertwined with its identity, yet this identity has evolved in response to each twist and turn of global economic trends. With manufacturing now at its core and its historic dependency on commodities gradually declining, Mexico has a rare opportunity to redefine itself once more. The future hinges on whether the country can overcome internal divides and the persistent inequality that still mars much of its progress. The vision of a developed Mexico is within reach, but it will require that every resource, every reform, and every dollar of foreign investment is channeled with purpose. The world watches as Mexico, fueled by both ambition and resilience, stands ready to make history.